Good morning, everybody. This is Farouk Oxyton. I am one of the hosts today. We still have a number of people dialing in, but we do want to stay on schedule. So I'm going to go ahead and get things started. Thank you all for joining us today. I know we're going through some difficult times as a nation, but it's never a bad day to learn and expand our knowledge, especially about exciting things like blockchain. So I'll just give you a very, very brief introduction. Very grateful for all of you who are here. This is an opportunity for us to discuss how blockchain is used in exciting and real-world situations, and we're truly inspired that it's you that's keeping this innovation and forward-thinking alive, especially during difficult times like this. So thank you all for joining us. I want to also thank my co-chairs, Eric Fulper and Dan Spoler. We wish all of you, especially during these difficult times, and your families safety, peace, and that our nation will move forward and our state will move forward from the difficulties we're all experiencing. I also want to thank Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest for having the vision and understanding about the importance of innovative technologies like blockchain, having confidence in us and putting together the North Carolina Blockchain Initiative. And we want to thank those on its team, particularly Blake Brewer and Stephen Walker, who've been so integral in the North Carolina Blockchain Initiative's ability to continue to do the things that we hope we can achieve together with NCBI. As a background for the NCBI, or North Carolina Blockchain Initiative, was formed on July 2nd of 2019 under the supervision of the Office of the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, Dan Forest. The strategic component of NCBI is to study, examine, and evaluate the unique attributes and use cases of blockchain technology, virtual assets, smart contracts, and digital tokens. And our ultimate goal is to promote opportunities for economic growth and cost efficiencies, as well as strengthening North Carolina as a leader in technological innovation. We also want to thank all the esteemed members of our initiative, whose names are on the screen now. They come to us from a wide range of backgrounds, all experts in their fields, and we're grateful for their contributions and support in pushing forward with the task of promoting blockchain throughout North Carolina. If you have any questions during the webinar, you're welcome to type in your question, and we'll take note of those and try to answer all of those at the very end. And you're also welcome to email us at info@ncblockchain.tech. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. Again, grateful for all of you to be here, but I do want to introduce Eli Sheets to the webinar. He's your presenter today, and he comes to us with a very exciting use case and how blockchain can be used in IP protection. And thank you so much, Eli, for joining us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Farouk, and thanks for the nice introduction. It's really an honor to be here presenting IdeaBlock to everyone, and hopefully you get something out of this. I think this is a pretty exciting use case for me, obviously. Dedicated the last 18 months or so of my life to it, and really think it's got legs. And just really excited to share it with you and to take your questions at the end to see kind of what everybody thinks, and if there are any places where I can expound a little bit on it to show how IdeaBlock helps protect ideas using blockchain. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I went to school at MIT and the University of Wisconsin and studied computer science and electrical engineering. I grew up in my dad was a supercomputer engineer growing up, so along with the discussion about the spaghetti and mashed potatoes at dinner, there was some coding and networking and network timing and stuff going on there as well as we got into high school. But all jokes aside, you know, I learned to code pretty early. Always kind of had that skill and used it in college, but I also was very interested in government and humanities and whatnot. So I thought intellectual property would be kind of a good marriage of both of those interests. After undergraduate study, went to United States Patent and Trademark Office and was a patent examiner for a couple of years. And once I got my fill of that, which was after about 1 year, and stayed on for another one, I decided I would go to law school make a decent living out of this knowledge. So I really liked it. It was a good place to learn the law. Went up to New England to law school. Served as a clerk in Illinois and Chicago at the Northern District of Illinois, and also as a clerk at the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. After that, I went to private practice, practicing on K Street in Washington, D.C. for a large national firm, doing a lot of work with 5G, with international telecommunications companies, Qualcomm, Ericsson, and the like. Kind of a lot of the stuff that you're seeing being pushed out right now when it comes to 5G IoT, driver-to-driver stuff, getting your Netflix videos downloaded in 5 seconds, that kind of stuff. I was kind of working on some of those inventions, about 5 to 7 years ago, and kind of really cut my teeth there with the law. But along the way, I saw a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of places inside of the whole process of intellectual property, and talking to clients, not only the large corporations, but also kind of the smaller clients who are trying to protect their ideas. It might be a one or two off for a company that's kind of a bet the company type idea, where they have this problem where they have no money up front, but they have the idea. And how do I get this thing protected to ensure that along the way, I'm not going to run into a Microsoft or a Samsung of the world who's might take my idea, who might sue me for infringement, and all of a sudden I'm going to have to shutter my business's doors and windows for a cease and desist letter. So without the money up front, it was tough for these companies to really have a shot at protection for these ideas that were integral to their company. And that was also true of the large companies. These are companies that have scaled up large intellectual property divisions inside of their company. I mean, if you look at Qualcomm's not really a telecommunications company. They're actually an IP holding company. They're an IP business, and you better believe that they're making sure that their IP infrastructure and process is robust. But even those folks who have all the money in the world to throw at that department are still leaving well over half of their ideas on the cutting room floor, deciding, for example, that certain ideas are worthy of the investment for traditional intellectual property, and some that aren't. And really the ones that were left on the cutting room floor just kind of sat there, and they never were utilized, and that value was left unmonetized. And I really saw kind of an opportunity there. And as we'll discuss as I talk a little more in the next few minutes, getting into blockchain and following Bitcoin early on, and getting down deep into the kind of the physical layer of that stuff and figuring out how it works, you begin to realize that it can be used for intellectual property in some cool ways if you look at blockchain as a timestamper. So let's get into it. So I'm not sure what everyone knows about IP, but I'm just going to give a quick rundown of kind of the 4 forms of traditional IP. Everyone has probably heard of patents, trade secrets, copyrights, and trademarks, and they're really quite different. Patents are, you're granted a monopoly in the marketplace, and you can use a patent if you're lucky enough to be granted one by the U.S. government or any other international government, to essentially block other competitors from the marketplace for a temporary amount of time in exchange for the knowledge that underlies that technology for the common good, right? It's actually in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the Constitution. It's actually in the Article 1. It's a very important principle of our economic system. Trade secrets are pretty simple. They can get complicated, but at the end of the day, it's protection that the government affords you for if you're able to keep your idea secret. They protect you against essentially theft. So that's called trade secret misappropriation when a company goes and tries to steal, for example, the Colonel Sanders recipe or the Coke recipe. They're not allowed to come break into your factory and figure that out and go take it and make it on their own. They're gonna have to pay for that. Now, if you don't put up proper precautions and put up a high fence and look out for drones, infrared with infrared cameras on them, looking to see what you're doing in there. These are all measures that you have to do to protect your trade secrets. Copyrights, pretty wide variety of items that can be protected with copyright. It's a very narrow protection in that it can be used for anything from, as you see there, artistic works, compositions in music, all the way down to code. So copyright was, as you probably are aware, was a very kind of in vogue means for protecting code, really through the late 70s and into the 2010s. Recent case law has kind of put that aside, and actually trade secrets, as I'll touch on later, have kind of come up in popularity for that reason. Trademarks, they're a little bit different, but people are familiar with, obviously, with trademarks in their daily life. You see them everywhere. They're a way to essentially provide notice to the consumer as to the source of goods. So they kind of carry a goodwill of a product that they're affixed to in the marketplace, so that consumers, it's really a public safety underlying it all, where you want your consumers to have information and a good feeling about knowing where the source of their products are, so you're not getting people drinking knockoff Coke that has bad stuff in it, for example. You want to know the source of those goods, and they'll protect that. So getting into kind of the brass tacks here of the problem with the traditional forms of IP, let's take patents for example. And when we talk pocketbook, these are not inexpensive. These the average cost of obtaining a U.S. patent is around $60,000, and is actually north of that now. And that's for one. And you can imagine, if you put yourself in the shoes of a startup, you might not have $60,000 to bootstrap the whole company, right? This is going to be a problem. So low-cost alternatives are really something that a lot of startups need. And again, when you scale that even up to a large company with unlimited budget and infrastructure to support that, when you're dealing with bandwidth of thousands of applications coming through, you're going to have to cut about half of them, and they're not going to get that investment because that number adds up very quickly. So the average cost of an international patent, if you want to get worldwide protection, $125,000 average, for all kinds of different combinations. You could go to Europe, you could go to China, a lot of different hot nations to get patent protection in with large markets. And then the biggie, the average cost of a patent lawsuit, this is whether you're defending it, whether you are asserting a patent, to get to trial, the average cost is $4,500,000. It makes that $60,000 look chump change. And really that's at the point where it's bet the company litigation. So you can see in the patent case, these are high costs, and these are things that, I mentioned the Constitution. These are things that are integral to our economy, and all of a sudden we have a $60,000 bar to entry for companies that are trying to bootstrap and make something of their life. Climb the economic ladder and make a better life for them and their family. Well, the Constitution didn't say limited monopoly for ideas. Plus give us $60,000. That part wasn't in there, but that's kind of been inserted by hook or by crook. So there's a problem there, and I think it's an opportunity. So another kind of principle underlying intellectual property generally is, when I look at blockchain, and this is where we kind of start to introduce blockchain, is yes, it can be used to transfer value, but as some of the previous guests on this webinar have attested to, it can be used for other things. And when I look at it for intellectual property, what I look at, large public blockchains like Bitcoin and Litecoin and some others, they're really time stampers, right? So they're crowdsourced truth in time. Much greater accuracy and concreteness than just going to ask somebody what time it is, right? It's not asking one person, it's asking this global network of anonymous nodes that are relying on this discrete algorithm and very very intricate cryptography to prove these timestamps. So if we look at it as a timestamper and really simplify it, you can see how this can be used in intellectual property for the following reason. If you look at all four of the different quadrants of traditional intellectual property, if you are first in time and then the asterisk, and you can prove it, right, you're going to win. Okay, and this is true of patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. Those are some legalese there, but we have a patent system. It's first to file. That's kind of the popular way to put it, but in all reality, it's first to publish. So if we're able to publish something and provably publish it using blockchain, that's a big deal because there are a lot of ways that people have tried to publish, which is on the next slide, traditionally, which judges and courts have just said, no thanks, that doesn't work. Copyrights, it's essentially the first to write down the copyright or code it, and actually you have to register it with the patent office. But all of these different types of intellectual property, if you're first in time and you can prove it, you're ultimately going to win. And leveraging that principle, you can see how it's starting to come together here. We have a technology it's a nascent technology, but it's very powerful in that basic function of proving time. Okay. So as I alluded to before, for decades, IP law had really no reliable way to prove time. People tried with hand-dated documents, private computer logs, rubber date stamps like you used to get at the library in school, doing this on lab notebooks, email dates, people signing lab notebooks, stocking them away in a company library, for example. Well, those things are better than nothing, but at the end of the day, the courts were starting to say more often than not that these documents, you could have done this at the Hyatt before you came down to the courthouse. These private internal company documents, there's no real verification, no third-party verification that this is actually the truth and you actually sign these things. So really over the last few decades, we see, no, that's not going to work. That doesn't work all the time. So you can't really go into court with any confidence, even if you have all of these, that this is going to work. There are multiple cases where people have had more than this and the judge said, no thanks. Okay. So that's another problem kind of in the law, is that we don't have a technology that exists before blockchain and Bitcoin and Litecoin or other public blockchains that actually does this timestamping. Okay, so what is IdeaBlock? So I've kind of laid the groundwork here, and I think set it up a little bit and for what's to come. But what we do at IdeaBlock is we utilize blockchain to prove people were first in time, to defend their ideas instantly, okay, against third-party intellectual property, right? Traditional intellectual property. So essentially look at that first kind of chain icon there. So we leverage blockchain to provide instant and robust IP protection for any idea. Right? This doesn't matter whether it could be a new R chain on a molecule for a pharma company. It could be a sketch and some new abstract art that you want to get a copyright on. Anything at all, right? We're able to provide defensive protection for that idea against your competitors or anyone else in the world from obtaining traditional forms of intellectual property on that same idea, and then later coming back and suing you, right? So we're really limiting that exposure that has always existed up until now, right? Where we can now block third parties from enforcing intellectual property on the idea against you, right? Which is pretty powerful. And this saves you a lot of money. Going back to the slide, initially, we talked about the costs associated with modern intellectual property systems. You can see how even if you take $60,000 away for one patent, at our pricing tiers, that's going to go a long way. That's going to be essentially at our current terms, it's like 60,000 seats. It's a real pennies on the dollar deal for people to provide that kind of robust protection. And I think that, based on our feedback from our initial customers, they really obviously appreciate that help to their bottom line when they're still getting some form of defensive protection. Now, we're not giving them an offensive form of protection that they can go out and sue people with. That's what a patent's for, and we're not the U.S. government, and no one can provide that. But we really do the next best thing. We provide this defensive protection to ensure that no one else will be able to obtain that offensive protection and assert it against you, right? You might have heard of the idea of patent trolls in the last couple of decades. These companies that essentially gobble up intellectual property on the market, and then send cease and desist letters out to anyone who could potentially be infringing on this, and essentially holding them ransom, and say that we're going to sue you, and you're going to have to risk that $4,500,000 bill at the end of the day, or you can pay us $50,000 tomorrow, and it really doesn't seem fair. And we've, as an industry, really been looking for a way to solve that, and IdeaBlock goes a long way in helping solve that, because there's this whole new form of defensive protection that can instantly nuke those pieces of intellectual property that are being asserted by the trolls, right? So next slide. So how do we do it, right? So this is getting a tad bit in the weeds, but it's really, I'm going to really stay high level here. But so what we do essentially is take an idea. So you look at this, a light bulb. This could be an idea that you've gotten some files on your computer. What we do is we put this through this black box, which are generally referred to as hash algorithms, but we put it through one specific one, the same one that Bitcoin uses, and it comes out with a 32. Oh, I'm sorry about that. A 32 character hash, which is unique to that idea. So that's important. If we go from left to right, we can put it through that black box and get this exact code for the same input every single time, right? And it doesn't matter if we do it today, it doesn't matter if we do it 20 years from now, we're going to get that same output, right? So if we're able to put that code that corresponds to your intellectual property or your idea into this blockchain, which is timestamped instantly, we can come back later on and prove that we had that idea at that exact time, right? And that's very powerful. And what's cool about the hashing algorithms, and you can see below here, you can go through, if you start with the idea and get the hash out, but you cannot go the other way, right? If I have this hash, it's essentially gobbledygook. It doesn't mean anything, but it's a code that corresponds one-to-one with this specific idea. If one bit in one of the files that comprises the idea changes, that code on the right is going to look completely different, right? It's going to correspond only to that thing, okay? And what's cool is that the algorithm that we use is called a non-colliding algorithm, which means that for every unique file or combination of files or combination of bits, any arrangement in the world, there's going to be a different output, right? So you can now essentially put a UPC essentially on every idea that's unique, and it's one-to-one. That's what powers underneath the proof that we can provide. So the way it would work is, right now, IdeaBlock would take these files, and we'll get to this in the next slide, a little more detail, but we take your files that comprise this idea, we bundle them in a specific way, we hash that bundle, and then we place that hash into several blockchains for you, which timestamps them, okay? And we keep all of that information for you, including the files in most cases, for your use later on as a user. So when you do get that cease and desist letter from a troll or from a competitor later on that's trying to assert a patent against you that was filed after you had put it on IdeaBlock, you simply send them the hash back and say, I'm sorry, your patent's no longer valid. That's not going to work. you're going to have to pay me money to not invalidate it, essentially. It really provides that kind of power. And, you know, a lot of folks are that we've been talking to are really excited about the potential of it. So let's get into a couple of use cases here, and I won't take too much more of your time, and we'll leave some time for questions here. But again, for patent defense, if you look at the kind of a three-step process here, you know, we take this idea, you give it to IdeaBlock. That's our logo here in the middle that kind of represents our engine. We anchor those to several blockchains, and then in the patent case, in order to invalidate a patent in US patent law, you not only have to prove that you had the idea first, but you also have to prove that you made it public before this third-party patent was filed. So to defend yourself against one of these third-party patents, you have to prove both of those things. And IdeaBlock does that natively. So what we do is we take your idea, we do all the stuff that I just said in terms of timestamping it, but we also make it publicly available when the user chooses. It's not automatically done. It's you know, the user has to pick when and which they would like to make public. But not only do we make it public, we also periodically prove that it was public every day, right? So we're not only able to prove that first step, that you know, this is the first time that this was uploaded, we also every day from then on are able to prove that idea was reachable by the public, right? So you're able to not only prove the first step, but also the second step with that same strength and power of publicly available blockchains, right? Very, very powerful stuff. Okay? I mean, the chances of us being wrong in this, it's not really us, it's the math underlying these blockchains, is essentially the same as winning Powerball and Mega Millions 23 times in a row. I mean, these are very, very small numbers. Chances of this being wrong, much smaller than, you know, someone lying on the stand in a jury trial, for example, or you know, almost 20 orders of magnitude more precise than DNA evidence, which has been kind of the bellwether of criminal law. We were actually taking people's liberty and life in some cases, even more powerful than that. So, and also another kind of form of defensive protection that we provide is trade secret defense. So what we do here is trade secrets are special in that if you make those public, this is not the thing you want to make public, because the instant you make it public to a third party, that trade secret is no longer a trade secret, right? And you're no longer able to protect it as such, right? So for a long time, there's been this quandary and this conundrum of being able to protect trade secrets, to say that you actually were using a trade secret without getting third-party validation that you actually were, right? So, you know, it's been a really tough problem. Well, we've solved it, and have provided this product that helps trade secret holders, which are becoming, you know, kind of an in vogue or more popular method of protecting a lot of code, for example, in the current marketplace. You know, we're able to provide defensive protection for those ideas, right? And this is how that works. And try to follow me. It's a little bit convoluted, and it's a lot of IP law is, but let's follow a scenario. So let's say the Acme company on January 1st starts using this trade secret, right? And they keep it very secret. And then their competitor, let's say Beta Incorporated, that July independently thinks of this idea, but decides not to keep it as a trade secret. They're going to file a patent application on it, okay? Now, the trade secret can't be used to invalidate the patent, so they get issued a patent, right? So now Beta company has an enforceable patent, and you've got you know, Acme, the first company that started using it as a trade secret in January. You know, they didn't do anything wrong either. They were keeping a valid trade secret and using it in commerce. So really, you have two parties that didn't really do anything wrong. You know, Beta filed a patent, they got a patent, and now Beta figures out that Alpha's using it, or Acme's using it, and asserts this patent against them. They sue Acme for patent infringement, right? Well, you look at Acme and they're like, well, how is this fair? You know, now I'm going to have to to come up with this, $4,500,000 to defend this suit when I was the one who had it first, right? Well, there's a cutaway in intellectual property law called prior use, which gives Acme in this case a chance to say, no, you can't sue me. You might be able to sue other people, but you can't sue me because I was using this trade secret before you filed for a patent application. Now, the problem with that is that it's been really tough to prove, right, that for Acme to prove that they had this on January 1st, because again, you're not able to get third-party validation on this, right? So what we do instead, right, is we take, instead of taking the files and bundling them up, like I mentioned before, we actually have on the client side, so on our users' computers, they run code that we give them that does all that hashing algorithm on their end, right? So instead of sending us their entire deck of trade secrets, they're only sending us this, these different 32 alphanumeric hash numbers that correspond to those trade secrets, but there's nothing substantive about those 32 characters. They're not giving us the trade secret. They're just giving us a one-to-one representation of it. Once we get those, we again plug those into the blockchains, timestamp them, and then give that information back to the user. And we have methods for them to securely store those trade secrets on their own end. But they're able now at that point to have proof, okay, that they had this trade secret at this time without disclosing it to us. IdeaBlock is a third party as far as Acme is concerned, but they don't have to disclose that to us, and they still get the same level of proof, this clear and convincing evidence that they were using it at this time. And as far as we could tell, and we've done a little searching, there hasn't really been that same kind of product that provides that. So we're pretty excited about that. And I have a quick little, let's see what time it is here. I think I got some time here, Farouk. I just did a quick little demo. So we are currently in beta. We're developing our full enterprise edition, our first non-beta edition, which we are actually debugging right now and doing testing on with our beta clients, which we'd be happy to take more on if you're interested and your company's interested in helping us out. We have discounts available, and we're happy to take more folks on. More the merrier. We're looking for partners to help us make our product the best it can be. But I just wanted to show everyone, just to give a little more concrete sense of how the product actually works on a day-to-day basis. I made a little demo video this morning that puts the North Carolina Blockchain Initiative logo on IdeaBlock. Okay, so
add a demo here for our existing beta build for the application, and just run you through kind of what it takes to upload an idea and protect it. So as any SaaS platform will have, you have to log in. It's pretty quick and dirty. And here you can see it brings me to my dashboard, which shows me all of my ideas that I've uploaded previously. These are just some sample ideas that we've been using for testing over the last few months. And as you can see, we'll use this one for example. This is the first idea we put on was IdeaBlock itself, some of the patent application documents and whatnot that describe the idea. So we take a look at an idea page here and see the information that it shows. So as you can see, all the files that comprise the idea are completely fully viewable here in this right window. This is an executive summary, kind of a UX diagram, figures from the patent application, for example, and any other files that you might want to add, including video and audio, which is pretty cool. Here at the top, these will be the locations of the hashes that we've created on the blockchain. So this is the Bitcoin hash and this is the Litecoin hash, and you can navigate to what's called a blockchain explorer, which tells you information about the Bitcoin and Litecoin blockchains. And as you can see here, this was uploaded about 8 months ago, has 36,000 confirmations, and we pre-pinned each of the ideas with this little idea moniker to make sure we can validate and find that easier inside of the Bitcoin blockchain, for example. And then we can also see, if you look here, we can see the hash is embedded right here. And if we went back and actually took the hash of this zip file, that would correspond to the hash that's actually inside the blockchain. So we can prove that one-to-one. So why don't we go ahead and upload one and protect kind of a dummy idea here. Not dummy, but a sample, right? So why don't we assume that the North Carolina Blockchain Initiative wants to protect their logo using IdeaBlock. So you can see the title or the idea name, and here make it public. Describe the idea. So here's the whole description. Here we add the logo itself. And this is a feature where companies or individuals can start to make families out of their ideas so that you can see the progression of a larger idea and essentially cut that down into little chunks or little portions of a larger idea. So you can really track the progression of intellectual property inside of a company, or if you're an individual using IdeaBlock, protecting these different components instead of having to wait to file a patent application, for example, at the end. You can really break it up and protect it instantly. So let's assume, just for kicks, that this is as a parent of the Bitcoin white paper, just for a sample here. And then for the thumbnail, we'll just use the logo itself, and then some tags. You can do samples, and then here you can review all the information that we've entered. Make sure it's all good to go. Looks good. And all you have to do is finish and submit, and it's kind of off and running. So as you can see here, we have this logo and the description I placed down here. This is what we added in the field during our kind of our upload wizard progression. And then right now, kind of the back end is working on getting these hashes inserted into these blockchains for us, and they should come back momentarily. And there you have them. So now you can see, for example, going back to the Bitcoin blockchain, as of a few seconds ago, we now have the hash inside of the Bitcoin blockchain, and it's protected.
Okay, so hopefully that was informative and gave you a little look about, a real kind of vanilla use case there. Hopefully, Farouk, you don't mind me putting that in the public. It's been out there for a few months, I believe. So I took my own liberty there to do that. But I think there's some time for some questions, and feel free to fire away. I think that they're being submitted by chat, but I'm not sure if and also there's my contact information. So let me see here. So I get to the chat.
Eli, I'm going to chime in just real quick. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody.
Okay.
And this is, again, Farouk Oxyton. Thank you so much, Eli, by the way. What a fantastic presentation. But I'm going to unmute everybody, so if you have any background noise, please mute yourselves. And then there's a couple questions that have already been turned in. They are...
I'll work with it.
Well, I hope they...
Hey, Phil.
Right, and that
one
number
thing that I was
write it on my pad.
unclear on. Dave says he has the tech team, the tech team thing.
Okay, guys, sorry, it's kind of loud in the background, so I apologize, but I've went ahead and muted. Eli, the couple questions that have come in already, if we can start start with those. I don't know if you see them, but
Yeah, I think so.
Blake Brewer. Okay, very good. If you want to just go ahead and move with those, and I apologize for muting everybody back up, but there was just a lot of background noise, so we can certainly try that again. But well, the floor is yours, Eli. Please go ahead with the questions.
Okay, so it looks like so Blake Brewer had a question. The question is, long term, should the U.S. move towards a first to conceive system instead of a first filed system for patents, utilizing blockchain and services provided by companies like yours? The greedy side of me says, yes, absolutely, tomorrow they should, and they should give us a government contract to set that up for them, right? But in all reality, we, before 2012 and 2013, we actually were a first to invent system. And that changed under President Obama, under the America Invents Act, to a first to file system, which we currently are under. And there, you can debate the merits of either, but at the end of the day, if you're keeping records of what ideas you're conceiving, and this is a lot of the reason people would use lab notebooks and date them in the past, is that this was a good way for them to prove when they did conceive of an idea, right? And under a first to invent or first to conceive system, if you're able to show that, you actually get that timestamp if you could prove it, right? This is going back again to kind of these legacy systems for actually timestamping stuff. It's, if you're confident with going into federal court and vetting the company on, Jim Bob's signature in the lab notebook, go ahead. But getting back kind of more to your question is, could we go back to that system and layer blockchain technology on top of those, more antiquated means of proving time? I think that's a possibility. I guess it kind of, not to mention the red tape and the fact that we've stood up this infrastructure in the fourth branch of the U.S. government that's now running under this new technology, or under this new first to file system. Theoretically, I think that would be a great way to use it. It would really be fair. I mean, I don't think necessarily, going back to the Constitution, I don't think that we envision giving rights, exclusive rights to folks who have quicker access to the filing system with the government. I think it, coming down to brass tacks, I think that what is intended is the first person to actually have the idea should have exclusive rights over that idea, or at least have the right to have a shot at protecting it, not the person that's able to get their lawyer off the golf course quicker, or the person that's able to have a robust system for filing and keeping track of intellectual property in their company. It's I guess maybe I'm old-fashioned in that regard, but I think that in America there's still this entrepreneurial spirit where someone could pull themselves up by their own bootstraps with an idea alone, and have a little more social mobility than is imparted on the current system, where it's access to this the know-how and the resources that are required to file these applications, right? So I do think there's something there. I think that in terms of what gives more equity to the system and populace as a whole, I would think I'm of the opinion that first to conceive or first to invent probably does that better. But then along with that, you're going to have to deal with some of the problems that exist in that system, which is kind of these gray areas about proving that you actually were first, right? And maybe you're right. I think there's something to that, where if you layer blockchain on top of that, I think that's a viable solution. The practicality of that, again, is up for debate, given the speed of government and the current Congress and whatnot. But it's an interesting question, and it's something to think about. So great question, Blake. And let's see here. So the Chamber of Digital Commerce, fantastic presentation. Thank you. I'm curious about the potential effect that allowing blockchain patents may have on innovation, collaboration, and interoperability is the Alice versus CLS Bank International case considered. I know it's frequently cited for issues dealing with software patents. Can you mute again? I heard a lot of background noise. I'm not going to mute right now because I want to answer your question, but I think that was obviously in the background, or in the past. So yeah, so Alice versus CLS Bank was kind of a landmark Supreme Court decision that happened now several years ago. But really what it did was revamp, and honestly, in the kind of the wake of that decision, at the time, I saw it as a disaster. And I think a lot of people are realizing that it was a disaster in terms of clearing up what exactly is patentable. I think they muddied the water a lot in that regard. And they took this test that had been, applied fairly well to determine what is actually patentable under the law. So the concept behind that principle, it's codified in 35 USC section 101. It's what is patentable, right? Can you patent, for example, the wind? Can you patent a perpetual motion machine, something that's physically impossible? Well, no, because these are not things that have utility. These are not things that are actually real. These are just either things that cannot be done physically, or elements of nature or things that occur naturally in the world that now people are trying to attempt to patent, like E equals MC squared, force equals mass times acceleration. These equations that define the physical interaction of things in our world, you're not able to patent those things. They've been around forever, implicitly, right? So you're not the first person to invent those things. You shouldn't be able to even file a patent application on that. And now that kind of really broad door, right? A lot of stuff's going to get through there, right? Most people aren't going to be filing patent applications on this stuff, but this case and several cases before it actually whittled that down, and now that law is being applied very forcefully against software patents that are even just patents on methods that are they may be implemented in software, but there are these broad sweeping rejections for patent applications on these wide swaths of industry that have typically relied on patent protection, right? So that's kind of the impetus behind why trade secret law has become more powerful lately, is that now people are saying, I can't even tell what is patentable anymore. Why would I waste the money on even trying to figure that out inside of a software application? And in a world where software is becoming more and more critical to so many business processes, even in well outside of the software realm itself, now we're going to say none of this stuff is patentable or protectable. It's some people like that. People think ideas should be free. Like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they kind of push for those freedoms, right? They don't want to restrict these ideas that could be inside of software, and there's a large camp that believes that, and I think there's some merit to that. Not to make any political positions there, but those folks should love IdeaBlock, right? Because someone using IdeaBlock, they're not holding anyone else up from using a software, but they're making sure those other people won't be able to come around it, get a patent on it, and sue everyone else, right? So the ideas really are usable, but you just protect the fact that no one's going to be able to tie that idea up in software forever. So, in terms of blockchain patents themselves as a category, I think that it could go either way. I mean, I would not bet on that being something that would pass Alice versus CLS Bank muster or the current state of 101. I've seen them go either way, and it really, it's sad, but a lot of the times it just comes down to clever wording. It comes down to how many times can you pay for another round of examinations and get a good examiner. These kind of things that are turning less substantive and more procedural. It's a really kind of state of affairs that Senator Tillis from North Carolina really took a crack at in this last year to really try to codify in an actual bill. So those negotiations kind of fell apart a couple months ago because people from industry couldn't really see eye to eye, and I think that he'll have another crack at it eventually when there's a little more political capital for it. But at the end of the day, it's a real mess, and I really honestly don't know what to tell you as far as what the future holds. But what I always used to tell people is, you never know where the law may be. If it's an important enough idea, at least go ahead and try to patent it if you have the money. So let's see here. So again, to Blake, follow up. Also, to be clear, IdeaBlock would enable folks defensive legal protections. Should patents be filed based on already conceived idea, but not to initiate suits against others? Correct. Right. So you can't go to court with a printout of IdeaBlock and say, hey, I'm suing you based on this, right? That's kind of the whole process and point of actually obtaining a patent from the US government, because they're the only ones who can actually give those out. But instead of that offensive use of intellectual property, what we do is we provide protection in case one of those people with a patent comes knocking on your door, right? And you were actually the first one to invent that. We can prove that you were first, and their patent that would otherwise shutter your company, shut down your business, put the assembly line into halt, much like what's going on right now in the industry in the United States, a lot of places due to the virus. But you get to say, no, actually, that patent's invalid, go away, right? And that's kind of the whole point of IdeaBlock at the end of the day, is that you get to have that power to say, no, you can't tell me what to do, right? Your patent's not good against me. And in fact, it's not good against anybody because it's invalid. I was first and I can prove it, right? Let's see. From Tefun, is quantum computing a problem for DLTs? Do we need to find an infinite loop cryptology? It's really up for debate right now. I know a lot of folks for a long time thought that would be, quantum computing would be the poison pill for blockchain. I'm not one to believe that. I think that, we're not looking at a world that's static where all of a sudden, we can't hard fork a blockchain like Bitcoin to use a more tough to crack algorithm underneath it. We have Schnorr coming here inside a blockchain or inside of Bitcoin. We have a lot of different technologies that can be added to beef up the security and to keep pace with quantum computing. Moore's law, it's a kind of a thing of the past now, and when are we going to get an actual quantum computer that can perform operations on these scales, on these levels? I know that right now IBM has been working on and actually made it public recently, essentially a cloud build of a quantum computer that you can buy time on. But at the end of the day, I really don't see quantum computing becoming a problem, just because I think a lot of people look at it as this static case of right now the current state of blockchain, and it's never going to move. We can't make it any more resilient to these other technologies, and we just think of, well, quantum computing is going to have this Moore's law, to the nth power speed, and we're not going to be able to catch up. Well, that's not really realistic. There are other ways that we can do this. And if we need to hard fork, we can hard fork some of these blockchains. It's not a problem. I think maybe eventually, way down the line, we might see that scenario where we just can't keep up. But, for all intents and purposes, and in the next 100 years at least, I don't see that happening. And I think that's the consensus from a lot of people I trust on the subject. Yeah, Dan, I get it. That's fine. I was just kind of joking about that. But from Gary, are there any other disadvantages to using blockchain besides the government's perspective that it's difficult for them to track? Well, are there any disadvantages? I guess it's compared to, it depends on what you're comparing it to. Blockchain is very slow compared to a traditional database, but that is a feature, not a bug of blockchain, because what you get for that that lack of speed in terms of putting information into this data structure, you make up with in resiliency, in immutability, in proof of the verification of that data. And really that's what we're leveraging here with IdeaBlock and a lot of other people that use blockchain. They're using that advantage of being slow and higher provability, right, and resiliency. So take a database, a traditional database, for example, you know, MySQL, a Mongo, or any other type of NoSQL database, just the typical ones that people use. You know, those are typically stored on private servers that aren't being validated by thousands and thousands of nodes across the globe that are independent and are running on a unified, you know, mathematical-based protocol. These are privately stored bodies of information that you know, can't be verified by third parties outside of that organization typically, especially if they're storing secure data like intellectual property for a company. Yeah, they're faster. Yeah, they're easy to query. Yeah, they can hold a lot more data, right? We're kind of limited to around 80 bytes for a transaction. That's why we use a hash in terms of, you know, looking at Bitcoin and Litecoin. But you know, you can pump a lot of data in there inexpensively on the database, but you're really going to lack, at the end of the day, the ability to walk into court and say this is true, right? A judge or a jury is always going to look at you, or opposing counsel is going to say, yeah, you're holding that MySQL database in your own private server. How do I know you didn't just make that build up today, right? You need verification from, you know, disinterested third parties, and that's really, in terms of data proof and timestamping, that's what Bitcoin, Litecoin, and some other large, you know, proof of work-based blockchains provide in terms of data integrity. Let's see, how do we handle it with GDPR? What about anonymity? Yeah, do you or not? Okay, so this is more of a question I think that typically pertains to KYC and other identity-based fields where you want to know, you know, who's who using this technology that's, you know, by nature anonymous, right? So and this is kind of where the technology butts up against regulatory requirements, especially in the banking industry. And you know, I know we saw, for example, Facebook Libra, when they tried to roll that out, you know, they were based in Switzerland. There were a lot of, you know, the white paper tried to deal with this kind of concern of governments in some, you know, somewhat creative ways. But ultimately, you know, it's something where, you know, you're either pregnant or you're not, right? You're either going to be anonymous or you're not. And in dealing with identity, you know, yeah, it's important when it comes to you know, traditional regulatory monetary systems, right? And this is where you talk about like stable coins, for example, or these you know, identity-based and security-based coins. And even look at Microsoft. I mean, they're developing a project, they have been for a while, called Ion, which is, you know, this distributed identity project where, and it's actually pretty cool. It's a way for folks to essentially do have an identity in this new world of distributed ledger technology. But, you know, I think when you look at IdeaBlock, there are ways for us to prove that a certain entity or company was the one who indeed put this on the blockchain or uploaded it to IdeaBlock. But when it comes to kind of technologies outside of that, you know, I think, you know, it really, when it comes to identity, there are really arguments for both. On a pragmatic level, you're going to have the government, when you're dealing with the banking industry and the traditional banking industry, they're going to want to know who's doing what, you know, at least for the time being, just because the kind of the bad rap that Bitcoin has gotten through Silk Road and some of the other stuff, where now every boomer on the planet thinks that everybody's selling heroin out of their trunk using Bitcoin. Well, I think that's about to change, and I hope that it changes quickly. In terms of public perception, maybe they'll loosen some of those requirements as time goes on. But as it stands right now, that they're being pretty stringent about that for good reason in a lot of cases, but not as many cases as they tout, in my opinion. Okay. Thank you, Christian. He said, thank you for the presentation. Blockchain adoption will transform commerce. Cheers. I believe so as well. From Kathy, how long did it take for you from the idea business plan of IdeaBlock to the proof of concept? And then part 2, what are the important steps or partnership allies in the process that helped you reach production and successful adoption of IdeaBlock? So part 1, how long did it take for the idea business plan of IdeaBlock to a proof of concept? So I kind of moonlighted this idea over about, I would say, 6 months before I left my job as a lawyer. And did this full time and went looking for a little bit of money to get it started up. So, I have four boys, 6 years old and under. So it's a busy house right now, especially. God bless my wife at home with them right now, wrangling the crumb snatchers at home right now. But I've been basically awake for the last 6 years. I don't know if I've gotten a full night's sleep in that long. Hopefully it's not showing too much, but it gave me a lot of time to code at night, even when I was working. And really that's what started it. I think that I started really logging a lot of hours into this because I really thought it was something that had legs. And that probably started, I would think, early 2018. And I was really only putting in, probably 3 hours a day-ish into coding it up and proving out the concept, to prove to myself that it was viable, first of all, because some of these blockchains are not easy to integrate with. And I had to code a lot of that up from scratch, especially for our use case. But once I, was able to do it full time, which was in July of 2018, I had the alpha built, which really did basically what you saw there on the demo by October of that year. So July, 4 months all in. I think that's probably about right. Like 5 months total with some of the time I put in before it. So it was a lot of work, and there was a lot of, wasted time in there, so to speak, in setting up the company, setting up the logos, getting an office and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, worked a lot of hours and really pumped it out to prove the concept to users and be able to say, this is going to work. And we're actually able to do this. So about that time. And then to get to beta, and it was another, we made some pretty drastic improvements and really expanded the feature set. And then again, so that was, the beta was released in, I believe, almost a year later. So I think about 10 months later, we'd finished up the beta build and then started working on the enterprise after we kind of debugged that. So, and that's what we're working on finishing up right now. So it's really quite an exciting time. And we're also working on a couple other side projects, not that we don't have enough to do, but we're also working on with some local media folks here. We've got a lot of folks here in the local Raleigh-Durham area that are some international and national players in the media space when it comes to documentaries. Like Thunder Mountain Media. We've got Bunker Sound, is a world-class sound recording studio in Hillsboro. We've been standing something up with this group along with Ray Williams, who was actually the first discovered Elton John, essentially, and introduced him to Bernie Taupin, and he actually lives in Chapel Hill. And we've been working for a few months now on standing up kind of a music blockchain project, music and media blockchain project that's kind of specific to those industries because they're so unique and have a lot of advantages in the blockchain world. So that's really exciting. We're also working on something with Microsoft in terms of pinning not IP files necessarily, but generally saving files to blockchains to, you can imagine, like wills, deeds, insurance documents that you want to be able to prove against Geico, right? That you were covered, for example, and other sorts of things, anything at all. And having that integrated into their workspace and then expanding it out generally outside of that platform. So got a lot of stuff going on. And part 2, what are important steps or partnership allies in the process that helped you reach production and successful adoption of IdeaBlock? So, we're still getting there. I mean, I think that we're in the middle of the process right now. We're about to release the first enterprise build, and it's a full-time job, and we're working really hard and always trying to to get new partnerships and allies on our front. We were a little bit discerning on the beta side. We didn't want to let a ton of people in because we wanted to make sure that we knew the folks and had relationships with them. So we were getting good feedback on the beta. We wanted to get productive feedback and be able to improve the product as we moved into the enterprise build. In terms of who we would look to make partnerships and allies with, we had existing people in our network that had some knowledge in IP law and technology, and really sought them out and look for people that have experience in a lot of different things and have had successful businesses in the past. I mean, looking at the marketing side, for example, kind of my right hand man in that regard has been Rob DiDomenico, who is kind of a master marketer with that New York kind of attitude. That's go get them, and kind of feeding off of that energy and that go get them attitude has really helped me in the marketing sense and the business side, and given me kind of direction in terms of who is the best kind of company to go at for a potential client, and not make that a dream, actually go do it. So he's been great and continues to be that way. In terms of other partners, you look, who's your first customer, who's your ideal customer, go after them, and then find the second one, right? If they're too busy or they're not interested, come back in 3 months and ping them again, and just develop these relationships. And you're starting to, I'm starting to see after 18 months those hard work up front. Now I'm starting to develop relationships with people that are turning into something that's more like a business relationship. So you just really have to keep pounding the rock until it breaks, and really develop these relationships and just be a good person, have a good heart, really be genuine. I think that goes for everything in life, but especially in business. Thank you. Have another meeting. Thank you, William. Appreciate it. And thank you for the compliments. And I think that's it, Fruit. I think we're probably 2 hours in, feels like. No?
I think, yeah, no, this has been